Congresswoman and committee member Elaine Luria of Virginia has just left the caucus room and joining us now. Congresswoman, thank you very much. I don't need to tell you, you're the only Democratic member of the committee who lost your reelection in the Tidewater section of Virginia, because maybe contributing to this because of your role here on the committee. I know you don't have any regrets about that. I've seen plenty of evidence of that, including your participation today. The 187 minutes that you focused on, how important do you think this was? The inaction of the president, in fact, that he was on the phone, that there were no records kept during that whole time on January 6th of his phone calls to and from, and the fact that for 187 minutes he did not stop the rioters from being violent, as well as the fact that you feel that there were then multiple efforts to intimidate witnesses by the President of the United States, and that the Department of Justice is aware of at least one of those.
Well, you know, I think this 187-minute period, it was the hearing that I led earlier with Mr. Kinzinger, it was a dereliction of duty on part of the former president. You know, as the commander-in-chief, and specifically delineated in the Constitution, the president has a duty to ensure that the laws are faithfully executed. And if you look at what happened on that day, and we laid it out multiple times through today's presentation, he failed to do that, and he failed to take action. He failed to call law enforcement in any form, including the National Guard, to quell this violence and this insurrection that was happening at the Capitol, despite the pleas of his family and, you know, all of these advisors and people from the outside, like his, you know, sympathetic Fox News commentators. They were just all barraging him with pleas to say, you know, you got to tell them to stop. And he just sat there 187 minutes and no action. And I think that, you know, as someone myself, a 20-year Navy veteran, you know, you understand this oath you take, an oath to support and defend the Constitution. The president takes an oath as well to the best of his ability to uphold the Constitution. He didn't do that. And, you know, if you look at the UCMJ, military justice system, there's actually an offense, dereliction of duty. And that doesn't exist in the civil system, but, you know, in our minds, we said the president had a duty to act, he didn't do it, and that just, it's the culminating moment of everything that led up to this. All of his attempts to corrupt every lever of government, including the Department of Justice, to find these votes in Georgia. I mean, we've laid this out multiple times, but it culminates in that 187 minutes. It crystallizes, you know, how clear, you know, his dereliction of duty, his inaction are. And, you know, we referred this to the Department of Justice. You know, I liken this to essentially like a relay, a baton passing. You know, Department of Justice are doing an investigation, they're already running, we're passing off the baton because, you know, there were limits within the capability of a congressional investigation. There's things the Department of Justice can do to compel witnesses, seek additional testimony, and we are passing along our information to them because we do ultimately believe that accountability is necessary here.
And briefly, you refer, the executive summary that has been now released refers to 4 instances of the former president, in the time the president, trying to contact witnesses, and that the Justice Department is aware of at least one. Can you talk about the witnesses or tell us how seriously you took that?
You know, that is really, it's fundamental to an investigation to understand that, you know, when someone is providing testimony, in this case before a congressional committee, that they're doing it of their own volition without any threats and or, you know, something like a promise on the other end. You know, we heard from witnesses that they had been offered potential, you know, jobs and other opportunities if they gave the right kind of testimony. So we have concerns from witnesses who came before us that, you know, they felt either threatened or compelled to testify in a way that might not have been completely truthful. And we wanted to make sure the Department of Justice, you know, understood the context of, you know, some of the transcripts we have, some of the testimony we received, and, you know, the lawyers who counseled, you know, those individuals to potentially testify in a way that wasn't entirely truthful. They need to be held accountable as well. So that is something that we talked about and looked at as the committee.
You talk about in the executive summary of the final report that the lawyer for one of the witnesses told that witness to just say, I don't recall, because the committee can't really push back on that. There's also in this executive summary on that same thread concerns about some of the witnesses not being forthcoming, Ivanka Trump being one of them, the other one, Tony Ornato, and that links back to one of the more or maybe perhaps the most explosive testimony from the hearing, which was Cassidy Hutchinson saying that President Trump wanted to go to the Capitol and reached forward for the steering wheel of the Secret Service car to get him there. She says Tony Ornato, the man you see in this graphic right here, was the one who relayed that to her. Ornato was asked about it, and the Select Committee, according to you guys, said that he, I guess, said, I don't recall. Can you talk to me a little bit more about his testimony and whether it defied Cassidy Hutchinson's or just didn't line up?
You know, sometimes you get a gut feeling like this just doesn't seem right for someone with a position in that level of authority and responsibility within the White House to be advising the president. The number of things that he didn't recall on that day was staggering. There were junior staff with, you know, much less level of responsibility who remember with great clarity many details throughout the day. And, you know, I think that we had a level of concern within the committee that his I do not recall, his lack of recollection of details concerning the events that day, it could fall in this category of testimony that's either not fully forthcoming or perhaps influenced by some outside factors. And we wanted to make sure to highlight that in our analysis of, you know, his testimony.
So who are you highlighting it for, though? The American public, so they get a sense for themselves on what they believe to be truthful and not truthful? Or is this a highlight for the Department of Justice to look into what lawyers might have been telling their clients, or whether Tony Ornato wasn't being truthful to Congress?
It's both, all of the above. The report is public. People can read it and come to their conclusions with the information we've provided. And, you know, like everything in the report and all of the material we've gathered that's not, you know, sensitive for national security reasons, we're going to pass that over to the Department of Justice. The American public's going to see it. And, you know, we made an attempt to draw the conclusions from our work that, you know, the committee thinks are the most important. But there's thousands of pages of documents there. And we hope the Department of Justice will scrutinize them, as well as the public, to understand what did these people say. We were only able to present, you know, a small portion of what we heard from witnesses, and there's a lot more there, and we just wanted to highlight what we thought was something important because it really characterized that person and that person's testimony.